Ellie Thompson's life was simple, ordinary even. She lived in a small village tucked away in the rolling hills of the English countryside, where the days were defined by the seasons and the rhythm of the land. Her family didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. Her father worked as a farmer, and her mother was a seamstress who made a living sewing clothes for the villagers. Ellie helped with the chores around the house, tended to the animals, and worked on the fields when needed. It was a life of hard work, but it was honest. Ellie's beauty was not the flashy kind that turned heads in a room. She was a quiet beauty with light brown hair that fell in soft waves and bright green eyes that seemed to always be full of hope. Her face was round and freckled from the sun, and her skin had the natural glow that came from spending most of her time outdoors. But what truly set Ellie apart wasn't her appearance, it was her kind and compassionate heart. She always had a smile for everyone and a helping hand for anyone in need. People in the village loved her for her generosity and warmth. But despite the love she had for her family and her community, Ellie always dreamed of more. She yearned for adventure, for excitement beyond the borders of her quiet village. It wasn't that she disliked her life, she simply felt like there was something out there waiting for her, something bigger than the life she had always known. She had heard stories of the bustling cities, of people living lives she could only imagine, and there was a part of her that longed to experience that world. It was on one of those rare moments of longing that Ellie found herself by the village crossroads on a crisp autumn morning, preparing to go into town to sell eggs and milk at the market. She was carrying her basket when a sleek, black car rolled slowly into the village square, catching her eye. Cars like that didn't belong in a place like this. This was a village where horses and carts were the main mode of transport. Ellie was used to the sound of hooves on cobbled streets, not the low hum of an engine purring on asphalt. The car slowed to a stop in front of her, and the driver's side window rolled down. A man's face appeared, his expression one of quiet frustration as he looked at her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth and rich, with a faint hint of an accent that Ellie couldn't place. "I seem to have lost my way. Could you point me toward the nearest town?" Ellie paused, surprised by the question. The man was dressed in an impeccable suit, his face sharp and handsome in an almost unnatural way, like someone who belonged to another world entirely. His dark hair was neatly combed, and there was a certain air of refinement about him that didn't match the humble surroundings of her village. "The nearest town is about an hour's drive down the road," she said, instinctively glancing at the winding road behind her. "But I could show you the way." "It's not exactly easy to find if you're not familiar with the area." The man gave a grateful nod. "I'd appreciate that." "I'm afraid I'm not exactly acquainted with the countryside." Ellie hesitated for a moment. She had never been one to engage with outsiders, especially ones who seemed so out of place in the village. But something about the man's demeanor intrigued her. He wasn't asking for much, just directions, and there was a kindness in his eyes that made her want to help. "All right then," she said, walking toward the car. "I'll guide you." As she climbed into the passenger seat, Ellie couldn't help but feel a little out of her element. The car was pristine, nothing like the old cars she usually traveled in. The interior was a soft leather, the dashboard glimmering with buttons and lights that Ellie had never seen before. The man adjusted the rear-view mirror and glanced at her. "I'm Edward Aldridge," he said, offering her a polite smile. "I run a few businesses, but I've been out of the office for the past few days. Took a little drive to clear my head." Ellie nodded, trying to ignore the feeling of discomfort creeping up her spine. "Ellie Thompson. I'm just on my way to town to sell some produce. My family lives just outside the village." There was a brief silence as Edward concentrated on the road, but then he spoke again. "It's strange, isn't it? The way things seem so different in the city compared to here. I can't help but feel ... out of place." Ellie glanced at him. There was a faint sadness in his eyes, a far-off look that seemed so out of place on someone with so much wealth and success. She was used to seeing that look on the faces of people who were struggling, not someone who had everything. "You're not from around here, are you?" Ellie asked, her curiosity piqued. Edward looked over at her, his gaze softening. "No, I'm not. I live in London, actually. But I've been feeling disconnected from it all. Sometimes I think I've built a life that's more about the things I own than the people around me." Ellie turned her gaze to the passing countryside, unsure of what to say. She had never been to London. She had heard of it, of course, the great city with its bustling streets and towering buildings, but it all seemed like a different world to her. A world so far removed from the small, quiet life she led. Edward continued, "It's easy to get lost in it all, in the chase for more, but every now and then I feel like something's missing. A sense of connection, maybe." The more Edward spoke, the more Ellie felt an unfamiliar empathy for him. She wasn't sure why, but there was something about him, his quiet sadness, that made her want to reach out and help. But what could she possibly do for someone like him? She was just a simple village girl, after all. They drove in silence for a while, the landscape rolling by, until they finally reached the edge of the village. Edward stopped the car, turning to her. "Thank you, Ellie. You've been kind. I don't think I would have found the right way without you," he said, his voice genuine. Ellie smiled. "It's no trouble at all. I'm glad I could help." Edward paused, looking at her with an intensity that caught her off guard. "You know, I've been to many places in my life, but there's something about this village, something about you. It's rare to find such warmth in a world that feels so cold sometimes." Ellie wasn't sure how to respond to that. She wasn't used to hearing such things from strangers, especially not someone like Edward, who seemed so far removed from her simple world. "You're welcome," she said quietly. Edward nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a crisp envelope and handed it to her. "I know this may seem strange, but I'd like to offer you something. A chance to experience something beyond this village, if you're willing." Ellie glanced at the envelope, unsure of what to make of it. "Don't feel obligated," Edward said quickly. "But if you ever find yourself wanting something more, I'd be happy to help. A job, an opportunity, a place to stay. Whatever you need." Ellie looked at him for a long moment, taking in his offer. She had always dreamed of something more, but what could she possibly have in common with a man like Edward? Still, there was a part of her that knew, deep down, that life had a way of presenting unexpected opportunities. "Thank you, Edward, but I can't accept it. I'm happy here. My family needs me." Edward's expression softened, and for the first time since they'd met, he smiled genuinely. "Of course, I understand. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." With that, he shook her hand, and Ellie watched as the sleek car pulled away, disappearing down the road. The encounter stayed with her long after she returned to her quiet life in the village. Over the next few months, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her. Her thoughts often returned to Edward, to his lonely eyes, to the way he seemed to be searching for something he couldn't find in his wealth or success. She had always believed that happiness was found in the small things: family, friendship, love. But Edward's words made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than what she had known.